Paige, welcome to the editorial board. Would you take a few moments to identify yourself, the office you seek, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll start asking questions. So welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm Paige Kreegle, and I'm running for the United States Congress. In Florida, that's the Congressional District 19, which encompasses parts of Lee and Collier County. I'm a medical doctor. I've been practicing in Southwest Florida for over 30 years now. Along the way, I was able to serve in the state legislature and represent the northern half of Lee County for 8 years from 2004 to 2012. It's a pleasure to be here, Jeff.
Paige, why seek this office at this time? Why again?
Again,
Yeah.
it's true. I did run last time, a year and a half ago, 2012, and it was a six-way race. As you know, the voters chose somebody else. Interestingly, that didn't turn out too well. So we'll try this again, and I believe the time is ripe. The voters are a little bit wiser, and it's a rare thing in life that we get a second chance to run for this office so quickly.
Probably have the reasons why people should vote for you changed since the last time, and if so or if not, tell us what they are.
Well, interestingly, although the faces have changed, the issues remain pretty much the same. If anything, they've gotten more poignant and more pointed. Issues like clean water and the toxic discharges that came down the Caloosahatchee last year from Lake Okeechobee, issues that affect our beaches and, by the way, our businesses and our homes. Issues such as the national debt, the untenable national debt, which has only gotten worse since we last sat here in front of the cameras. Issues which are going to affect our coastal communities, and this entire district is a coastal community, and that would be the really unconscionable increases in the federal flood insurance rates, which are going to be very hard on homeowners and would-be purchasers of homes. However, it's going to also impact our cities, municipalities, counties in their ability to raise revenue from properties which are now essentially devalued by government action. So it's going to impact their ability to deliver services.
Did I hear Obamacare in there?
And there's always Obamacare, Jeff.
Okay. I'm sure I didn't miss anything.
And I think 2 years ago, Obamacare was coming but wasn't quite here. And I think people are starting to realize that the fallout from this misguided legislation goes a lot farther than a messed up website. I think the very basis of it has been called into question now. And I think it's quite telling that the president seems to make up the rules as he goes along, appeasing first this constituency and then that one. The most recent one was last week when he let the unions off the hook for another year. So, yes, Obamacare is big, and it's big on most people's agenda, especially the elderly. And the elderly, for my medical practice, has always been the backbone of the medical practice. When you do primary care, the truth is you see older people much more than younger people. And the really unconscionable cuts that we've seen to the Medicare and Medicare Advantage program started January 1st has fallen really completely on the elderly, and I think it's a national disgrace.
Have you seen these negative effects show up in your practice yet, or are they still working their way through the pipeline?
Oh no, they all started January 1st. They started actually before that when people got notices in December. The new panel of physicians wouldn't include, for example, their cardiologist, their kidney dialysis doctor, their oncologist, and they're having to scramble and go see people farther away, and it's harder to get into because there's fewer doctors, fewer specialists anyway on their panels. So the effects are there.
Paige, could you take a moment and just describe what your practice is? Because I want to make sure I get it right, and I'm not sure. I mean, it's kind of changed over the years since we've known you. So your daily practice is what kind of?
Let me tell you about it. I started my career as an emergency room physician, and that's my background and my board certification. I did that for 5 years, and then transitioned into primary care, general practice. And I did that in a variety of practice settings for about 20-something years.
Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte?
Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte area, yeah. After the last election, it was a time for soul searching and a bit of change, and not least of which were the changes coming about through the Medicare program and the difficulties of continuing in private practice there. A good friend of mine runs a trauma center out in Arizona, and we've had a vacation home out there for about 20 years. And actually his wife was running for the Arizona State Senate. She won, so we had a lot of talking during that election there. Afterward, he kind of came down on me pretty hard and said, listen, we need some help out here, staffing in the trauma center. And I looked at it, I went out there and visited. It's an opportunity, it's a teaching program, so it's in supervision of interns and residents in emergency medicine. And it was time for change. So I did, I started that 1 week a month. And it's been a good thing. It's hard to be away from your family, but it's quite the change. And emergency medicine has changed quite a bit in the 20 years since I've been out. I need to tell you, thank God for the interns and residents, because for that first year, I learned more from them than they did from me.
So that's what you still do now?
I'm still doing that now, obviously, since January 2nd when we rolled out the campaign. I've truncated that back to 3 days a month at a time. In the interim, I was once again impressed upon to help a friend of mine here, an elderly doctor who had aviation medicine practice.
You examine pilots and things, right?
You're exactly right. Yeah, for their fitness to be able to fly, and you also you do examine it. There's more to it than that, but basically that is the practice. And so I agreed to help him for a few months, after which the true purpose came out. He wanted me to take over, and then he would assist me on a part-time basis. So I did a lot of soul searching and realized that the practice I'd had up in Charlotte County, due to the changes, there was not going to be room for myself there at that practice anymore. I was not a full partner, and the other physician who was in my position there felt the same way as well, so we were both looking at other practice opportunities. Finally, we shut that down, and I just did this, what you would call full-time, and then the other. I'm doing 2 part-time jobs. I guess that's going to be the best way to describe
So
it.
aviation medicine for
And
pilots,
emergency medicine.
and then out in Arizona. Where in Arizona?
Kingman.
I don't know where that is.
That's a good thing.
But I know Arizona, sort of. Where is it?
It's outside of Las Vegas, Nevada.
Okay. It's beautiful out there.
It is in its way. It's it's quite a change from Florida.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a good place.
So what sets you apart from the other candidates, Paige? Your medicine?
I have 8 years of legislative experience, Jeff, and I think that's important. And over 30 years of medical practice in a variety of forms, not just practice, but I've been on the boards of several hospitals. I've taught at USF. I have been in emergency medicine and primary care. I've been a medical missionary in Central South America to people who don't get a chance to see doctors. So I've been in most phases of medical delivery and medical distribution care. And that 8 years of legislative experience, 30 years of medical practice, and 55 years of staying out of trouble.
Let's combine the years as a legislator and the medical practice. What do you do in place of Obamacare? You're clearly against it, but what should we be in favor of?
There were always inefficiencies and inequalities in medical care and the distribution of health care. So no doubt that change was inevitable and change should have been done. I disagree with the direction this has gone and the way they've kind of taken a plate with a chip in the side and smashed it on the ground. Say, well, now let's put it all back together again. Well, it's not going back together very well. Right now, well, let me go back. When they passed Obamacare along a party line vote, by people who admitted they hadn't read it and didn't understand it. The battle cry, so to speak, was that 15% of Americans don't have health care. It's true, 45 million Americans didn't have health care. What's left out is the flip side of that 85% of Americans did have health care, and repeated polls had shown that most people were happy with their health care plan, whatever it was. Today, more people than ever before are not covered by health care. And that's the first failure of Obamacare. So they made it worse rather than better. So at least for a start, we need to get back to where we were. I think we need to be able to look at the reality instead of forcing people to do this and forcing people to do that, which was never in the minds or the hearts of the people who, our founding fathers, who put this country together. I think that we should use market forces to allow people to purchase the health insurance of their choice.
Isn't there something to be said, I mean, as an ER doctor, you had special insights. People who would come to the ER because they didn't have a family doctor, and they would come to the ER for routine things, and that's really expensive. And it's not the best use of that resource. But they also run up big indigent care costs. Wouldn't a federal program at least cover some of the hospital and the doctor's expenses?
Well, you've shifted gears now that you're talking about covering their expenses. But let's get back to the original thing you said, Jeff. That's absolutely correct. And everything the federal government has done, even before Obamacare, in the 5-6 years before Obamacare, drove more and more people into the emergency department. Obamacare has accelerated that with no increase in ER physicians. So you're absolutely correct. It is the most expensive form of care in the ER. But unfortunately, this didn't make it better. It made it worse. There has always been a program for funding unfunded care in Florida. It's called the LIP program, Low Income Program, and that is about $1.8 billion state pool, which they divvy up each year according to some sort of formula, which has always historically been. You've never heard of the LIP?
I'm sorry, I haven't.
Okay. I see the quizzical look in your
No,
face.
well, I often get that, but
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Okay, low income pool, yeah, it is for, it is to help hospitals who provide unfunded care.
Okay.
And there's a formula, and the formula has always been subject to various political rewrites.
Okay.
It rarely stays the same from year to year, but it's done by the legislature. And the last time I was in there, 1.6 or 1.8 billion, so it's a considerable sum of money there.
Okay.
And
Does that money go to buy insurance for people or to pay their expenses at the emergency room? And if it's paying emergency room expenses, isn't that paying more than it needs to be paid if we could somehow divert those people into some other form of care prior to the emergency room?
listen, as a physician, I would love to see everybody covered by great health care, no doubt about it. Not just from the financial point of view, but that as well, but by the fact that I'd like people to be able to see a physician and get their problems taken care of. I do that for a living. On the other hand, that's not always going to be, reasonably achievable 100%. If you take apart that 45 million people who do not have any health insurance, among them are 11 million people who are here illegally. That's one of the reasons why they don't have health insurance. They're here illegally. I don't know how much hardworking, tax-paying Americans actually owe them for health care. I'm not saying ignore them, but I'm throwing that out that I'm not sure how much we can expect people who work hard and pay taxes and are here legally to pay for that. So when you start taking apart that number, you find some interesting things.
Talking about being here illegally reminds me at the candidates forum on Friday at the Collier County Courthouse. One of the questions from the audience, I think it was kind of snarky, and it said, why should Latinos, was the term that was used on the question, I think, why should Latinos or Democrats or independents trust any one of the candidates at the table, and you were one of the trust the candidates on the immigration issue. And your response kind of caught me by surprise because you spoke rapid, fluent Spanish. And I didn't know what you were saying. Or can you recap that and what the point was there? Because I wanted to get it, but I didn't quite get it.
Basically, I think I said I grew up in Miami,
Okay.
which is an immigrant city. And I understand the special problems that immigrants, especially Latin, Spanish-speaking immigrants have. I need to tell you, though, that the term Latino isn't universally appreciated.
Correct. I think
And
that
it
was the one on the
includes-
card. Okay.
It includes a diverse group of people and interests and political and other feelings that probably have, the only thing in common they have is their native language.
Okay.
So I'm only sensitive to that because I was born and raised in Miami, you know.
Right.
We have Alex Melendez here, you know, he doesn't speak a word of Spanish. So, yeah, is he a Latino? I don't know. He's a,
Okay.
okay, so I do understand that, but you certainly, getting back to your question, why should any of these groups of people trust you? Well, I don't know that they will or not.
Yeah.
Democrats and Republicans,
The question was a little pointy.
yeah, they have some baseline distrust of each other's philosophy to begin with. Immigrants, why should they trust you? Well, I guess if you're going to be a trustworthy person, and you know, they'll need to find out that, you know, it's difficult to say in advance why somebody should trust you. It's easier to live the life and look back and say, well, I've been trustworthy. So.
Thank you.
The party leadership in Washington seems split at times over the proper approach to take towards immigration. Were you elected and were you in a position of influence or to be able to cast a vote one way or the other, what would your, in general terms, your approach on immigration reform be?
Let's talk about immigration because that's the elephant in the room, really, and it's going to come up one way or another again. To begin with, I think it was getting kind of loud. I didn't know whether they were laughing at me or.
No.
Getting close to 5.
To begin with, I believe we do need to secure our borders. I believe our country can assimilate a certain number of immigrants every year and should continue to do so. I don't think we can assimilate or support an unlimited amount of immigration. At the same time, we want to bring in immigrants who are going to be an asset to our society. We need to secure our borders. It's a national security issue. If we don't have secure borders, we won't have a country for long. And we need to secure them, if for no other reason, because there are people who would come here to harm us. Think of 9/11 and the Boston Marathon bombings. You don't have to go too far. There's lots of bad people out there, and as they say, there's some bad neighborhoods in the world. Once you've done that, and that needs to be done now. How you do it, I don't know. I don't care. It doesn't matter whether it's the local constabulary or the immigration or the border patrol, the National Guard, the Boy Scouts, whatever it is. We need to secure our borders. And then we need to deal with the roughly 11 million people who are here. Now, they're here less than legally, illegally, whatever you want to call it. They, once again, like any group of people, are a diverse group of people. I think we need to make some rules, decide what kind of people we would want in our country, and apply these rules without bending them, and sort these people out on an individual basis, because they're all individuals and all human beings. And I've said it again, but I go through it again. You have a felony conviction, it's time to leave this country. You have multiple arrests for violent crimes or drugs, it's time to show these people the door. If you've been a freeloader since the day you got here 10, 12, 15 years ago, and you found how to torque the system and not add to the country, but just take, we don't need takers. It's time to show them the door. On the other hand, there are millions of immigrants here who, mothers and fathers, and they work often more than one job, 2, 3 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And usually they're not CEOs. Usually they're fairly menial jobs, and yet they work hard. They work their butts off. They come home. They make their kids study. They want their kids to have that part of the American dream. Well, they might be here under less than legal circumstances, but it seems to me like those are the kind of people we want in this country. So I think we make the rules and apply the rules to those people who are here. and sort that out. Those people should probably be given a path, not a free citizenship, but a path towards citizenship so that they can approach citizenship the same way other people would. You know, it takes 5 years, you have to take the courses, you have to go through the same hoops as anybody else and be assimilated into American society. But these people, if they're working, if they're paying taxes, to me, they're already on the right path.
So 5 years would be,
Well, that's what it is for everybody else.
Is that,
I don't think we should put them in front of the people who are doing it legally.
mhm.
And I don't think we should forever penalize people who are hardworking, tax-paying people.
is that practical? 11 million people, case by case, as individuals go through them. I mean, the mind kind of boggles at the people you would need to sit down with that many people and
Well, yeah.
assess.
First of all, I think we need to do it, period. We need to deal with it. That's the elephant in the room. We need to deal with it. Second of all, that breaks down to a lot smaller numbers, okay? If they're a mother, father, and 3 kids, now you just took your caseload down to 2 million from 10 or 11. So yes, it's doable. And by the way, it's real easy if you start running the computer programs. Who's got felony convictions? Who's here for violent crimes and drugs? That's an easy one, really. I don't think if I were an immigration judge, I don't think it'd take me too long to run through that. So it's simply a job we need to do.
Paige, your campaign got off to a big start, a huge start. You started out with $1 million in the war chest, and the $1 million came primarily from 2 large donors of about $1 million apiece. And when we first asked you more about those donors, since they're so significant, you weren't really eager to tell us a whole lot about them. Could you tell us a little more about them now?
Well, let me back up to your math. Not $1 million each. That would have been $2 million.
Correct. I
About half a
I meant $500,000. I'm sorry.
Right.
So thank you for
It's all right.
correcting me.
I do slip of the tongue all the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't worry about it. So yes, they are guys I grew up with, and they prefer to remain private citizens. I will tell you they're actually brothers, even though they have different last names. I'll add you that. How's that?
I noticed one of them had a Las Vegas address. Is that by any chance your emergency room friend that
No,
you're working with?
no. He's an attorney, that guy.
So you grew up with them in Miami?
Yeah.
How come they're with you this time around? Were they with you the first time around? With the big money? I don't remember seeing that.
They were always donors. They were always
Of this
donors.
magnitude?
No. It was a different race back then. It was quite a different race.
Yeah.
You know, it was felt
more
that
fragmented.
It was fragmented. I had a longer drum roll getting into it. Honestly, we all did. I especially did. This is going to be a vastly foreshortened race, and the idea of collecting money again, once you've lost a race, becomes much more difficult. So the question is, how do you keep it from being a 6-way race? And these people came up with the idea of forming a PAC and funding it. So that is what happened. And I think, in its way, it did keep this from becoming a 6-way race for all intents and purposes, not to discount any one person, but it's a 3-way race. So I think it's formed, it's done its job to that degree.
How do you think the race is going with the run-up on the negative TV ads? And I just have a hunch we've only seen the beginning.
Of negativity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, the attack ads, and I guess that's negative, depending on which side of the fence
Going
you're on.
negative, yeah. Going negative, attack ads, stuff like that. Yeah. Well, let me tell you what. I think it's going to get a lot worse. From the look in your face, I don't know if I answered that question.
Well,
You want me to expand on that? I will.
Please do.
Sure. Well, I see them already on television. It looks like Benequisto's PAC has gone after Mr. Clausen. And I expect at some point in time he's going to get sick of that and probably turn the tables on her. I did see one mailer came out of the PAC supporting me that went negative on her. So I expect there's going to be a lot more of this. And it's not the way I have ever run a campaign. It's not the way this campaign with these three gentlemen is ever going to run. But I've been told repeatedly, although I made my personal feelings obvious up front, that I would not be allowed to coordinate in any way the messaging. And so I'm completely out of that loop. That being said, we do know that Ms. Benequisto's consultant is Public Concepts out of Palm Beach, which is known for nothing else but negative advertising, attack ads. In fact, if you Google attack ads, they probably have an ad coming up there. So we know that there are PACs and PACs, all of which seem to have the same address in Tallahassee, and they all function to her benefit. Some of them most certainly funded by the Republican Party of Florida. So I would expect most of that goes towards going negative, because I think if you're going to go positive, you can just do that out of your own campaign a lot easier. So to answer your question, things are negative, are probably going to get worse.
I'm trying to ask all the candidates if there's anything in their present or past that we don't know about yet that you might care to tell us about now, that if it comes out that it might affect your ability to serve the public in an honorable way. Is there anything we need to know?
I'll tell you what, I've been in public office for 8 years. I had some knockdown, drag-out campaigns. I have had, in medical terms, I won't use that analogy, let's just say I've been fully probed. And, every time I have been sued in the past, whether it's been electricity or paternity or medical malpractice, that has been out there as an attack ad, and they can do it all over again if they want to. That's fine.
So what you see is what you get.
I'm here with all the wrinkles and warts and gray hairs. I have not been arrested. I don't smoke dope. I don't drink or smoke, do anything really exciting.
When you were talking about health insurance, you said one of the solutions would be to let the free market take care of it. Why does that not apply to flood insurance? Why, if the government got out of flood insurance and let the free market take care of it, would the rates not be pretty high? And why is it okay for the federal government to subsidize flood insurance but not, say, health insurance?
I never said it's not right for the government to subsidize it, but I think if you want to even out the risk nationwide, you're going to have to have some form of doing that. It's a lot easier to even out risk in health insurance because you need much smaller, geographically not nearly as diverse groups. There's flood-prone areas in Florida, flood-prone areas in New York, and believe it or not, in Nevada. I hear, well, Las Vegas flooded last year, right? So we're not alone there, and I think you need a national mechanism of some sort or another. It doesn't preclude the private market from coming in, but you do need a national mechanism, and that mechanism might be reinsurance, might be federal reinsurance for the private market in the flood insurance program. I'm not an expert on insurance, but that's there. I do believe that when it comes to the flood insurance raises, the increases I've seen, that they make no sense. In some cases, I read this in the newspaper, by the way, in some cases they are predicated on having to replace a structure every 4.5 to 5 years. Well, that is not real. That's not our experience here in the flood program. There is no place in Florida which is flooded every 5 years. Actually, we're except for small areas, I think San Carlos Park, we really haven't had in the district a flood to speak of, and probably since Donna in the 60s. So I think that model is what's wrong. I don't see any problem with raising the rates to accurately reflect the risk, but I think that model is what's all wrong. And we had a a similar situation right after those terrible storms, which, by the way, hit just as I went to the legislature in 2004, 2005.
Right.
What we had at the state level was the insurance companies were trying to get permission to use a new model. Now, we'd always used a 50-year historical risk model. Some companies used a 75-year. It's hard to go back 100 because a lot of areas of Florida just weren't populated back 100 years ago, but use 75, and the most common was a 50-year model. Well, what they tried to do was change to what they call a 5-year model, but with a rolling average. Well, that meant 2 of those 5 years had horrible hurricanes striking the state. So your rates, if you use that model, would just be out in the ionosphere. They do not accurately reflect your risk. They reflect the last 2 years, and if you notice, since then we haven't had a hurricane hit us. So I think, the debate was on that. So we kept them to the 50-year model, and that allowed some rise in rates to more accurately reflect the risk of an increased population, especially towards the coast, where you're at more risk of a hurricane hitting. But it kept them down from the astronomical increases we've been looking at if you just allow them to use a flawed model. And the flawed model is what we're getting out of the flood insurance program. It's almost a scare tactic to scare people away from coastal community. We are a coastal community. I don't think there's any area of Lee or Collier County which isn't at least at risk of flood, unless you're up in up the 20th floor up there, some of those towers. So,
We're over time, and that's going to have to be the last word, and thank you for your time.
okay. Thanks, guys.